Hi, everybody. This is 1,493 days. 1,493 days since Richard was premeditatedly murdered on Fort Bliss um, after being retaliated against uh, severely, continuously. And then after his murder came the cover up and then also the smear campaign. Okay, the smear campaign. And why would they do that? To uh, deflect, to discredit Richard's reports, uh, and also to mislead the ethical law enforcement community, because we know that there was the dirty, the unethical um, criminal group from the original response team that are absolutely involved in this, harboring the prime suspects, covering up for the prime suspects. And so now we have more and more people coming out and giving us information. And they're giving us information, bringing back Lieutenant Colonel Bradford Bugado in the mix. And also Jerry Jakovitz, the command sergeant major, he's being brought back into the mix. And of course, he told us to our face that they meaning Major General Clem Coward, um, brought in girls um, to party on on post during the COVID lockdown. He told us that, and that was just really shocking. We went and investigated, since we were made the chief investigators in our son's investigation, murder and disappearance. Um, so we looked into that to see if what is going on there, and sure enough, we have have it on record that they were bringing in the girls. They were young. The post was shut down, but the girls were at the gate, and cars would come by and pick a few of them up, and they were, wearing um, clothes that were meant to entertain young male soldiers. And, I don't think they were being 6 feet apart. I don't think they were wearing masks. Uh, no. And I don't think Jerry Jakovitz, Command Sergeant Major Jakovitz of the 32nd ADCOM, was the chaperone at these parties to make sure, they were wearing their masks and 6 feet apart and everything. And how old were these girls? Because we know that there was a 14-year-old living in the barracks, a 14-year-old female living in the barracks, civilian, being pimped out um, to the soldiers. And that this young girl, 14 years old, with her teddy bear, I'm sure, teddy bear, um, being absolutely abused because, we know from Sound of Freedom, it's not just one time a night, it's terrible. It's just really terrible. Um, but we know that she was living in the barracks, and that she was the stepdaughter of one of the security um, police under Director of Emergency Services Thomas Kane. We know that. So that's confirmed. Um, there's no question about that. We also know now, um, and even President Trump in his campaign is mentioning that 325,000. He, he says in his little talk, 325,000 migrant children are missing, right? Are missing or unaccounted for. Um, I want to stress something that he did not stress, and that is that they were unaccompanied. And anybody that has young children that are minors absolutely is horrified by 325,000 unaccompanied minors. Of course, they are going to be exploited. Of course, he has more access to intelligence than I do. But he says that most of them are not even living anymore. And I know from hearing Richard and um, in our conversations, he just says, Mom, I'll talk about anything, but I just can't talk about it. It's just so bad. It's so bad. Okay. And, you know, he was reporting it over and over and over again. We have evidence that he was reporting it. He was reporting the criminal trafficking, and they didn't take heed of Richard. They murdered him, and they covered it up after retaliating against him. After absolutely, we know because of the agents. Thank you, Anicia, for coming on. I see you now. That they were intimidating and trying to manipulate witnesses. Anybody that was following, and still to this day, anyone following this live stream, and us while we were there in El Paso and crossing over to Juarez, there was so much manipulation and so many lies and so much redirection, misdirection. Um, and we know that they started their asymmetric warfare tactics even then. And I don't think, at the beginning when I first used asymmetric warfare tactics, because our first CAO was from the asymmetric warfare unit, and he was caught creating a fake account to intimidate us, to spread misinformation about our case. This is our casualty affairs officer liaison, but he was our casualty affairs officer. And then, we're on I think our sixth or seventh one, casualty affairs officer. And they have to, by law, give us that because they always knew that Richard was never missing, that they knew that he was murdered. They had recovered what was left of his remains, maybe partial remains, and which, I'll get to today, the information that's coming in. And we have, it's just coming in heaps now. Um, mountains of information. And this is about FitFam El Paso LLC because we acquired that and what's behind that and the people that are behind that. It's not just Jules Tuganon Chan. It's about Leilani Hart and the new communication confession of hers that throws Bob Moore under the bus, and also throwing her ex-husband, James C. Hart, under the bus, exposing him for the child pornography once again, and no one's listening, and he is still right there with the most vulnerable soldiers with the disability, the board for veterans disability, the Pablo. That is outrageous because it goes on, and we have corroborating evidence of communications that absolutely point to him with child pornography, point to her with child pornography, and of course the incest, and of course the child sexual assault. Long history of it, long history. So this is, illegal weapons purchasing. And, I have to say that just about every time for people to understand that there is, and this is something that Lalani also exposes in her latest communication, is that there is a weaponization of our agencies, specifically um, in this communication, the CID and the FBI. And we know that with Dirty Agent Tavita Nusa, Dirty Agent Marlon Soto, Dirty Agent for the FBI Supervisory Director, uh, Eddie Nieto. Um, and, this connection, I don't know if I even can say that. Um, there's some things I'm not at liberty to say. I have to be careful because we are cracking this case, and it's really, really important. But I can talk about the media. I can talk about how she, throws Bob Moore under the bus in this communication. And this group, this is a criminal group. I call it the Bob Moore criminal group, right? That is not limited to, but a large portion from the original response team. And when you understand that, then you understand their access. When you understand that they are DES Thomas Kane, when you understand that they are CYS and Ogle, when you understand, and we know who it is in the CPS, and when you understand that it is FBI Supervisory Director Agent Nieto, when you know that it is CID who lost his badge, he's no longer CID, he's been separated, Tavita Nusa, and just the access with Eddie Rocha, and I don't mention him too much, but he brings in a very important aspect into this whole case and is absolutely connected. And the same thing with First Sergeant Michael Ruggiero, who is retired now, and I think he lost his First Sergeant title. But he needs to be arrested. That's what he needs to be. Losing a rank or a title or whatever is nothing compared to what is in store for him, because of the obstruction, and Command Sergeant Major Jerry Jakovitz with Major General Clem Coward. And, we also have, and I don't mention him hardly ever, but his name is coming up now, is Sergeant Major um, Albert Fletcher. Albert Fletcher name is coming up because he was the sergeant major, I believe. Maybe I get the titles wrong, but we talked to him on the phone um, for 32nd ADCOM. Okay, so no, for 143. For 143, he was a sergeant major, and of course Jerry Jakovitz for the 32nd ADCOM. So, um, Albert Fletcher played a big role uh, in 143. And that means the retaliation, the cover up, because he absolutely threw Richard under the bus if he allowed Richard to be so retaliated against and he didn't have his back by Lieutenant Colonel Michael Roddick, and David Park the same way. So many of them, they're really facing incredible charges. Um, you know, I'm almost getting like a little paralegal law degree in this with all the research that we're doing. And I would not want to be on the wrong side on all of this, but they are. They are. And what was it for? To protect their jobs, to protect um, their criminal activity, to continue the criminal activity. And what that does is it empowers even more criminal activity. And so we've went from 85, 82, 85,000 um, unaccounted for children, meaning most of them are most likely dead, as President Trump has said now, and he's one of the only ones that are speaking up about it. And he needs to speak up about it because the Walmart mass shooting includes him. The Walmart mass shooting he was targeted with that. They used that politically against him and unjustly. And I would call it out if it was justly. Just like I call out the usurper Bill Hicks, who was appointed by Governor Abbott, the Republican, right? But Bill Hicks is a usurper. And the Walmart mass shooting absolutely targeted President Trump in the for the 2020 election. The Walmart mass shooting happened August 3rd, 2019, and they will stop at nothing. And you see what's going on right now. Um, you know, Today at church we read a psalm, and I should have looked that up before I came on, talking about what true joy is, and it was completely the opposite of what they're trying to spew right now is joy. And it's not joyful to allow 325,000 unaccompanied minors, to encourage that, because that means, in my opinion, and hearing President Trump say what he did, and I'll post up the video. I probably should play it. Um, he said that they were ripped out of their houses. Okay, now I don't know if that's true or not, but what he meant by that is they did not go willingly through Central America and crossing the border unaccompanied. They didn't do it alone. They didn't do it unwillingly. They didn't do it willingly. Um, there was some stuff going on there. That's what he means by that, in my opinion. And I agree. I agree, because no way. It's not 50,000. It's not 80,000. It's not 5,000. It's not 80,000. It's not 100,000. It's not 150,000. It's not 170,000. It's not 200,000. It's not 220,000. It's not 280,000. We're talking 325,000. 325,000. It's hard to wrap our mind around that kind of number. It is absolutely human trafficking and sex trafficking and labor, right? Cheap labor. Which is not me saying that. It's already in the news that they found some of these unaccompanied migrant minors and sleeping in factories and working in factories for cheap labor. So it's unbelievable that a politician is even saying it. Something that we know is absolutely true because of all the evidence that we have uncovered. And why am I talking about this when, the title is the incinerators, the chemicals, the acids, right? And it's because I'm trying to show the motive for Richard, the motive, what he was reporting. Because if you're doing this level, or wanting to do this level, or we know that they did do this level, and then it went down, it was being threatened. And it was being threatened by Richard, and it was being threatened by President Trump when he was in office. And why do I say that? I say that because Richard is dead. And I talked to Richard, and he said it was very, very bad. And we've gone over this and over this in our family. When he would say very bad, it was absolutely crimes against children. And we know that he turned in videos of crimes against children. We also know that he reported to CPS, Child Protective Services. And we know if he is going to risk his life, if he is going to, if he is witness to what they're doing to children, then he's going to report it. And was it bad on Fort Bliss? Yes, DES Thomas Kane said it was. What was on Fort Bliss? The intake center. Now, the feedback that I'm getting from the criminal group is, wait a minute, that intake center didn't start until 2021. That official big intake center didn't start until 2021. Exactly. But that doesn't mean that they weren't trafficking children before that. They've been trafficking children for a long, long time. A long time. And we know that when they brought the unaccompanied children over, it wasn't good. And we know that from DES Thomas Kane, and we know that from others, and more people are coming forward. And we have to protect whistleblowers because there's a breach in the security. There's a breach in the security for whistleblowers, for oversight. They are being targeted. They are being murdered. They are being made, their life being made so miserable. And, this is part of the smear campaign. That Richard going through months. Can you imagine 45 days of only 4 hours of sleep after being retaliated all day long and having to wear a mask and having to wear your full body gear outside, doing your extra duty, and, being called every kind of name in the book because I got the screenshots of, from witnesses that that witnessed what was going on. And of course, this was pretty early on while we were there before they reached so many of the witnesses to intimidate them, to threaten them. I'm sure they, we have the proof that they were doing these kind of things, this intimidation and these threats and maybe bribery behind the scenes. In this case, we know that. And we know that there were things like Danae Katzen, where they organized for misinformation, like Jay Paulin, misinformation, like Captain Park, misinformation. And so we have the motive, and we have the chain of command up to no good. Absolutely up to no good. And our suspects in the retaliation, murder, and cover-up case of our son. Prime suspects being First Lieutenant Dallas Hart. I would say Jay Paulin. Absolutely. I would say Michael Ruggiero. And I would say Lilani Hart and Tavita Nusa and Jonathan Ambrose. And there's a few more. It was a absolutely, um, in our opinion, a group, and that group, which includes Amber Chase, which includes Jules Tuganon Chan, which includes so many um, in this first response team, right? The original response team. Um, would they have with Tavita Nusa? Tavita Nusa's brother is Mortuary Affairs. Would they have with Mario Raskin Ortiz? Would they have? And we have found out that even through the sheriff's department, you would have access to an incinerator. And we're getting word that we need to look into those. Um, who got who acquired an incinerator during that time, and who acquired biological, uh, I would say, acids, right? Um, to get rid of Richard's remains. And yes, the thing about the dismemberment is absolutely on the table, and what they did must have been so horrible. Um, and that's why we need to get to the bottom of this, because we need to know the truth. Did they dismember him and use an incinerator on some parts? How did they do it? Did they use acids that destroy biological material? Do they have access to that? Well, through their connections, they absolutely do. Do they have the ability to tamper with records? Absolutely. Do they have the ability to tamper with GPS history? Absolutely, they do. These are cyber professionals. These are professionals that have access to confidential files. These are individuals that have access to the leadership of the law enforcement in CID and um, FBI, and also, I believe, EPIC, El Paso intelligence community. Um, this they had this group. Do they have access um, to security personnel? 100%. They have DES, the director for Fort Bliss, the director of emergency services, in charge of all the cameras, in charge of all of the gate guards, everything. Um, he's part of this group. He is part of this group. And so is Ann Ogle. Is she with CYS connected to CPS? And, we know more about that. Does she have the power to tamper with files? Um, does this group have the ability to organize? Are they trained in organizing plans? Yes, Bradford Bugado, um, Michael Ruggiero. Could they use explosives? Would they have access to explosives? Do they have access to incinerators? Do they have access to acids? Yes, yes, and yes. And do they have the manpower and the loyalty, um, with those in Juarez, Mexico? Because don't forget, this is an international case. Do they, collaborate with Juarez, Mexico, with the AG's office? Yes, we worked really hard, and that's why uh, oh, what's his name? The general counsel, right there at the AG's office, he left. He left. There's a new one, and the new one hasn't even answered us. He hasn't engaged, which is despicable, which is, uh, you know, evidence in itself, just like Bob Moore not responding to no less than 15 attempts. And, why? That's evidence. When they want to hide public files, when they want to flush their journalistic integrity down the toilet, because he's been totally discredited. And now with Leilani Hart totally changing the story, totally changing the story, that means she's not credible at all. And of course, she's a confirmed convicted criminal and a absolutely liar in crisis. She has a mental health um, condition, and Bob Moore is using her to obstruct justice in our son's case. Yes, he did. Why? Why is he part of this group? Why ignore us, right? And join in the group of prime suspects? And why, this is what is very, very different about our case than I think any other murder case. Where have you heard it from? We need to have, you know, uh, some help here. Where have you ever heard that the media is using the prime suspect in Richard's murder case, in a murder case that is a confirmed convicted criminal and more and worse, and using the prime suspect in the murder case to use as an unreliable source in order to obstruct justice in that case, to discredit a witness in that case, to spread lies about a witness in order to discredit a witness in that case. How many times? Where have you ever heard that? And so, that really is evidence against Bob Moore of El Paso Matters, which is El Paso Community Foundation, which connects us, of course, Rosa Maria Valdez Garcia, which she absolutely confirms that she is very close to Rosa Maria Valdez Garcia in her latest communication. And, it's hard to, it's not like, oh, I'm very close. Um, you have to know what evidence has not been released in the news. If she has information of that has never been released in the news, and information about certain cases that has, you would really have to be close relatives, close friends, maybe go to the Mormon congregation together to get that kind of information. They're close, y'all. There's no doubt in my mind. And so, thank you, Danielle, for coming on with your prayers. So, do they have access to and the planning capability and the cleanup capability? Yes, they're all trained in this. I mean, Jules took it on chance, said he had first-hand experience with the Walmart, right? With the response to Walmart. And he had um, an active role, a leadership role in the emergency intake center, where, many of those migrants, where President Trump is talking about 325,000 missing, and he says dead. He says most of them are dead. They've been exploited to work in factories for cheap labor. They've been exploited, like the 14-year-old girl being pimped out on Fort Bliss in the barracks. They've been exploited sexually, and then a lot of them are dead. And why are they dead? For what reason? Are these Is this group involved in sex cult? Yes. Yes. So not only do they have access to confidential files, and they have access to incinerators and explosives and corrosive acids for biological material, they have access to that. Um, they have a way to manipulate files. You saw that. Um, do they have uh, skills when it comes to cyber security and all hacking? Hacking, you know, absolutely. They have that all. Do they have, uh, support from the leadership? Um, Major General Clem Coward, General Garrett, General McConville, General Mealy, Gen- um, Lieutenant General Sean Bernabe. So, and there's more, and there's more. Um, so they absolutely have. And, at the beginning, years ago, when we would say this is a an organized criminal uh, network that is doing this, and people say, "Oh, it would take so much. It would take so much to do this. How could they pull this off?" Well, we've been uncovering that they absolutely have the ability to pull this off. They absolutely do. And that means HRC is involved. And we know that. And that's why we were saying that, like before we acquired FitFam, or even now, illegally, um, that there's something behind FitFam El Paso LLC. And that's why we acquired it. And that has gotten traction behind the scene because um, that freaks them out a little bit. I think it does. Well, we know it does because we got the responses in the mail because of it, and we'll see um, what the state and federal investigations, if they actually hold people accountable. Say, they're we'll investigate. We'll investigate. We'll investigate. It's an active investigation. No, we want accountability. We're done with the investigations. We've got mountains of evidence. We want them to be held accountable. And if we have mountains of evidence, you absolutely know what happened, right? So they don't need to do all these investigations. They know what happened, and We want those that committed these crimes to be held accountable because we need to um, safeguard what we do still have. And that's our most valuable assets, our volunteer sons and daughters, our national security, right? Our national security. So they absolutely have the ability, and don't forget that mortuary affairs individuals are absolutely connected to this. Do they, and even the sheriff, Sheriff Wiles, was offering an incinerator to the public, right? They have access, they know people, they can get incinerators, they can get the tools necessary to dismember because it's very difficult to, my husband's a PA. PA, he used to be a perfusionist running the heart and lung machine. He's been through, seen lots of surgeries and everything. Even traveled uh, to look into different surgeries and how they were performed and how the perfusionist. Yeah. Anyway, um, it's very, very difficult to hide remains, to get rid of remains. It's just very difficult, and they would really have to go through a huge process. And do they have access to facilities that have that kind of equipment and those kind of chemicals? And the answer is yes. They absolutely do, without even a doubt. So, Danielle, did Krabby Empath give a coordination that she believes Richard's remains may be? I really wish she would do another reading. She says water. And we have information, we have the information from Red Rio Range. We also have information from, uh, how do you say that word? Um, Waco, Waco, um, that area. We, of course, um, have information from kilometer 29 in Juarez, Mexico. And there's a water area. Um, so, she said a water area. And, close to where the airport is, we have information. And would they want to hide evidence and Richard and water? Would they, and to separate him? It's very difficult, uh, you know, and here I am, I have to talk about it. These people need to be held accountable for what they've put us through. Also, in addition to being held accountable, this is why Leilani Hart is having a crisis in her lies. I mean, the lies don't are just so absurd. The lies don't even make sense. The lies contradict everything from before, and so and it also exposes uh, that the agencies there in El Paso have been weaponized against us. And I would go further than that, but let's just leave it at that. What she exposed. Um, so that's weaponization. That's abuse of power. That is, and we know that from Jake Jakovitz. Jerry Jakovitz, he was shaking, and I'm not lying about that. And so there was, it's hard to describe indications that they're guilty and of the murder of Richard, um, just by our meetings and how they reacted. It's hard to describe that to people, but you feel the spirit, you feel the evil spirit that's emanating from them. You see it in their eyes, and most of the time they were masked, but you just see it. And I would, um, yeah, they should already have written findings, not investigating. Exactly. Exactly. You're absolutely right, Danielle. And we do have the findings to an extent with the Board of Inquiry, because the one thing that, and they did that all illegal too. Um, and we were really complaining about how they did that, because we're like, you're not following standard order operating procedures. You're not following your own rules in what you're doing. Um, and that was to disallow us to attend to see them face to face, because that was the second board of inquiry. You see, they had an initial one. The initial board of inquiry in a case, you cannot, the family is not allowed to go. And then this latest one, where we got the declaration of death, that was the second board of inquiry. And they called it the initial, and it wasn't the initial, it was the second one. And the reason why we know that is because we got a letter from the aftermath of the first one from the general. And so, we're sending them copies of what we got and saying, look, there was already one. It was called the initial one. Now this is the second one. And by law or regulations, we are allowed to go. My husband handled all of that. And they were like, no, this is the initial. They refused, but you can provide us information. And we did. They said that, and we provided a lot of information. And so much information, we knew that the only determination would be that Richard had been murdered. And so they came back with the declaration of death, and the spot for that death being Fort Bliss, which is a declaration of murder. And we knew it. So they had no other choice, and that was a positive moment for because so many times in this, they have no other choice, but they still do the wrong thing, right? They still tamper, they still do the wrong thing, like not letting us attend. And so just that they did do the right thing in the Board of Inquiry. Um, now we're in the step of Richard's remains, but I would say accountability. And that's why Leilani Hart is really freaking out, because she's seeing the writing on the wall. She is seeing the lethal injection. That's what they're seeing. This group, you know. So, because of these, and now we'll have even more um, state and federal investigations going on. So I don't know how long it's going to take, but I can tell you this much: the case is cracking. So, sometimes it can be really fast. Sometimes, who knows how long this is going to go. But it it really is about a huge criminal trafficking network. And when it's this big and so many people are making money off of it, it's kind of like the Mercedes electric vehicle that exploded, right? In Incheon, South Korea. Um, they're not really covering it so much because so many people are invested in these electric vehicles. And the disaster that just happened there, if you haven't seen that, if you haven't looked it up, because it is in the news, but you have to really look it up. That it's such a huge disaster. It's so bad. And the reason being, not necessarily because the vehicle exploded. That's that's not, I mean, that's a huge problem, right? But I've been in, and believe it or not, it was right there on the El Paso Juarez border. I was in an exploding vehicle. I survived an exploding uh, um, VW van, those old fashioned VW vans on the border of El Paso and Juarez, right there. And I have a story to tell about that. It was something faulty in the engine, and so it's not so much about the explosion. And I can tell you, because we have a long history there in El Paso, that it didn't take over 8 hours to put the van out, to put the fire um, caused by the explosion out. And the fumes coming from it um, did not render thousands of people homeless. And this EV, um, when it exploded, it's lithium. And the lithium, you cannot put it out. Over 170, I think it was 177 firefighters tried to put it out, and uh, it wouldn't be put out. And so the smoke and the fumes and the fire that burnt so hot destroyed over 200 vehicles, even more. I mean, totally burnt out 200 vehicles um, surrounding it in the garage, and then all the others that were inundated with all the thick smoke, and then that thick smoke with all of the soot. With all the toxins, went up into 5 high-rise buildings and the community center. Um, and it ruined the water, and they're not covering it in the news. It's huge. And this is what's going on in El Paso. Richard's case is huge, but they're not covering it because so many are implicated in making a lot of money off of the criminal trafficking. And it's toxic and it's contaminating, just like this lithium battery that you couldn't put out, right? That is contaminating and toxic. So we're going to keep going because even if they will, they're intimidated, but more and more people, this is the good news coming out. Why we're finding out that we need to look into Michael Ruggiero, we need to look into Bradford Bugado, and their connection with James Hart, with, of course, Nadal Bayim, um, because more and more people, more and more, veterans coming forward, they're sick and tired of this. And, they want to stay anonymous, of course. They have to find a way, make a way to communicate with us. Um, but it really is. I just don't see how you can go up against God on this one, because God doesn't want 325,000 unaccompanied minors that go missing because they're exploited. They're absolutely exploited. And if they're dead, uh, you know, Christ have mercy. Lord have mercy. And not on the perpetrators. And not on the perpetrators. Yeah. and not on those that capitalize off of this. You know, this is where um, you have to say, I'd rather be poor. I'd rather live a humble life. I rather, and the truth of it is, these people are miserable people. You go and look. Most of them have filed for bankruptcy. It's not enough to profit off of this terrible crime. They they file bankruptcies. They have all kinds of problems. They're miserable. So it doesn't buy happiness. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't make you happy. It makes you miserable. And what it does is it brings down the community. It brings down the world. You're not making the world a better place, and you're hurting others. And of course, Richard wouldn't stand for it, and he reported the criminal trafficking, and they targeted him, and they ended up murdering him, and they covered up this murder. And part of that cover up was to cover up his remains. And they have the ability? Uh, do they have the training to plan something like that, and to organize something like that, and to get equipment, which would include possibly an incinerator, these certain acids, and you know all kinds of other mortuary affairs kind of equipment. And could they, organize that whole thing? And the question is, this group? Absolutely. That's their training. So thank you so much for coming on. And I will be back tomorrow. I wish things moved real quick, with all this FitFam stuff, with all the Bill Hicks stuff, because I'm hearing that that's not good what's going on with Bill Hicks, the usurper and trespasser in the 34th Judicial District Attorney's Office. I hear it's not going good, and it should not be going good for him. He should be in handcuffs, um, and we need Yvonne Rosales to assert her legal right of that position. She is legally the legitimate district attorney. If she doesn't want to do it, and you know, I hope she does. I hope she does. But it's just, you know, it's she's gonna need protection, and the best protection is the people for her, right? But she's definitely uh, will need protection, and she needs to do the job properly, and it would be totally scrutinized. Should be under a microscope. Um, so we'll see what happens with that. But I hear there's a real shakeup, and of course the other one is Mario Raskin Ortiz. He should absolutely um, also be arrested for what he did and be made to pay back all of this money, right? It's kind of like Bill Hicks using the drug confiscation, or the drug money, when they solve a crime and there's drug money there, and you confiscate it. He's using that drug money to fund his own lawyers, in the SB4 case, right? Or which is absolutely unethical, not allowed. So that just shows you that what I'm saying with the open records about retaliation against Yvonne Rosales, and the plotting and the scheming, all the scheming. There's so much scheming, um, that actually happened. And you don't even have to believe me. Just go and get the open records yourself. Um, you have the right to access those open records and read through them. So, you know, and other things that are going on right now. But that President Trump is outing these unaccompanied minors that have been exploited. That's a big deal for our case. That's why I'm mentioning it, because Richard was reporting on it, and it didn't need to happen. It could have been stopped before. Richard is a hero, and um, yeah, pray that we get his remains. And because we're getting word that they use some pretty tough equipment on him. So yeah. So God bless you, and I will for sticking with us, for sharing, for doing all the brainstorming and all the leads that you have given us. We really, really appreciate it, and please don't stop. God bless you, and I will be back tomorrow, God willing. Bye bye.